Welcome to Dear Sandy. I'm Sandy Galiff, a member of the New York State Assembly, representing parts of Northern Westchester and parts of Putnam County. And this evening we're really going to talk about a very, very important issue. We have young people and older people throughout our communities that are addicted to different kinds of drugs and other things. And so we're going to talk about some of the approaches that we have to help people and to help families with addiction. And I have as my guest Danielle McCarthy. And Danielle, I guess your title is Addiction Resource Coordinator for Philipstown. Philipstown, for those who don't know, is in Putnam County on the Hudson River, one of the communities that I represent. And so you have a really special title, I would say.
I do, yes. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for having me. It's very unique in the approach that our town has taken towards addiction and substance abuse. And I feel really proud that this position began only a year ago, back in March, and I'm the first one to hold the job. It's a position that's constantly evolving as I learn more about addiction and mental health, and the town of Philipstown, the town board, especially now Putnam legislator Nancy Montgomery, who was then on the town board of Philipstown, was a huge advocate in making this making this position happen.
I remember, and Philipstown is probably no different than most communities, but I remember that there were so many instances of particularly young people overdosing, losing their lives, families distraught. I mean, and again, this isn't in just one community, it's all over. And I believe that was the impetus to say we really need somebody to help us coordinate what's going on here in our community.
Absolutely. Back in 2014, there were a number of young people who lost their lives to fatal overdose, and the more I learn about the opioid crisis and the longer history that it's had, I realized that communities were just late to the game in understanding what was really going on, and in terms of prescription drug abuse. And so families were really hurting, and the community was hurting. And Philipstown, which encompasses Cold Spring, Garrison, Continental Village, really came together as a community, and a group formed, a coalition formed around this issue, the Philipstown Communities That Care Coalition. And that we started to take a hard look at those issues and educating ourselves on addiction, the causes of addiction, and educating families on maybe what was things that were right in front of them, but they weren't realizing were
was
there.
This community group made up of many of the families that had lost?
There were,
or was it other people that were saying, well, this could happen to me?
Yeah, I think it was a mix, and there was definitely families who were currently struggling with a loved one experiencing addiction problems, and there was friends of family members who had lost someone. I think in a lot of cases, some of our local families have spoken out. We've had overdose awareness days. In August, there's National Overdose Awareness Day, and on the waterfront in Cold Spring, we've hosted these overdose awareness days, and local families have spoken, and it's been a really special, brave moment for them, able to stand up there and tell their story. In the beginning, I think we had to cut through a lot of shame and stigma that kept people away from the meetings, and then we just kind of kept pushing and trying to educate the community.
When you talk about the stigma and so on, is it because I've heard so often families really internalize it? You know, maybe they don't know what's happening with their child, but they might also know, but they don't necessarily want to broadcast to their neighbors or to the school, thinking that either their child will be impacted negatively or the social problems that they might have, or their feelings that they have caused something. I don't know. I suppose all of these feelings, if you have a child that you know is participating with drugs. I mean, so what do families do?
Yeah, there's so many different issues, and there's so many different ways and barriers that keep families from reaching out. Philipstown's a very small community, and with that comes a lot of great things, a lot of positives, lots of good friends and neighbors who look out for each other. And also there is the reality that sometimes people are very nervous about their neighbors finding out their business, and when it may be something that they don't want to share with the larger community. And so I think that issue of trust and building those relationships of resources that we are here for you confidentially was really needed in our community. And I think that's a barrier for families everywhere. Families are really hurting. I work with families now who are finally reaching out, but that's taken time. It wasn't that on day one I started this position and people were right away reaching out to me. It took some time for people to get adjusted to the fact of making a phone call or telling someone who they knew could get in touch with me that they needed some help. And you get parents and families at different, sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's siblings or grandparents who reach out. You get them at different points. It may be very early on, finding out that their young person has been experimenting with drinking and at an early age. What should I do here? Do you have any resources that I can share and have a really educated conversation with my child, which is a really proactive approach to all this. And then you get the other end of families who have been struggling for years and are really do not know what else to do. So it's a wide spectrum.
And when somebody calls you, everything is very confidential, I would assume.
Very confidential, and I tell them that, and at the same time I want to refer them to appropriate resources, so we work around that and I'm always very honest and upfront with families. But my approach is, I think, a community approach in that sometimes I may receive referrals from our local law enforcement who know that a family's struggling and it's not necessarily a law enforcement issue, but they want to step in and see that these families are getting some help.
So can you assertively call the family and say you're available to help out?
We're not at that point yet. They have to reach out, and we're
reach out.
Yeah,
okay.
So we're experimenting with that right now. That's an area that I'm really looking at with with Judge Linson in Philipstown, who is at the Philipstown court, and I appear at court once a month at criminal court in her courtroom, and I sit in the back and I have my cards there and we provide some information. She introduces me to the participants, and I have had people stop and get my card and quietly ask me questions on the side. And there will be some instances that she'll encourage the participants, please reach out to Danielle McCarthy. Her cards are back there. And we've been discussing how can we work around this so that I can be more proactive in reaching out to them, because we know how hard it is to make that phone call, and when there's so many barriers against that.
So the young people, are these young people or older people that we're
in court?
That would
be that's adult. That's adult.
That would be adults.
Yes.
So adults have been driving while intoxicated,
right?
Causing problems in the community because of intoxication of some sort.
Right. There's a relation to some sort of substance. And what's great and what Philipstown Court has been doing, and Judge Linson in particular, is encouraging those participants to come back. And because even if they're showing, okay, I've made a lot of progress, I'm receiving treatment here, look at my report, I'll see you next month. And so just to get to gain, so we're really trying to look at how can we better support these participants in our court process as well.
Right. You mentioned before people reporting that there's a problem. Do students, tell you about other students that are having a problem, or is that not so? Is it hard for young people to report on other young people that are friends?
Yeah, I think that's difficult, and especially again in a small community. I think I hear more from parents than the students themselves. And so I think it's a process. I think the more I get into the schools, and I have a really good relationship with both Haldane and Garrison schools, and so it's a process of introducing myself to the community that way. And I have 3 boys who go to Haldane School District, and so a lot of the students know me as a parent, but to know me in this different role requires some learning.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going in to educate people. What do you do when you go into Haldane School? Not as a mom, but
right.
as a counselor. How do you go about doing that?
So now, as of now, I work with administrators. I have strong relationships with the administrators there, so that we work, and with the Philipstown Communities That Care Coalition, we've brought educational events to the community. There was a young woman in recovery who lives up in the Albany area, and we had her come down in the fall to speak about her experience with being addicted to opioids and heroin. And so that was really, on a larger community level, educational. And we're still, again, because it's in the newer stages, we're working out how can something like this look on a more of a micro level. There's day to day, depending on, because this position is constantly evolving, and it is a part-time position, and it depends on, I could be one day visiting St. Christopher's and looking at how their intake process works to really inform my referrals, and the next day I get a call from a family in crisis, and I need to quickly shift gears and put on a different hat to help that family. So it's exciting, and yet some days it feels like I'm doing one of those parts really well, and the other part I'm kind of struggling to keep up.
Well, you're only one person,
Yeah,
as you say,
exactly.
working part-time in a community, but it is really quite unique and really great. So when you have educational programs, I remember going to an educational program, I think it was in the Lakeland School District. I mean, and they tried to get a lot of parents to come with children of all ages, basically, to have a discussion about the impact of opioids, the drugs, and so on, and alcohol, and whatever. And, I thought it was successful. I don't know whether it's the wrong people that come, the people that aren't going to have problems, or is it you're just trying to prevent things from happening? How does that all work?
Yeah, but I think it's a mix of both, and I think what the opioid crisis is really teaching us is that no one is immune from these issues, and so it really is a community problem which requires community solutions. So even if you think, these families are attending, and I wish these families were attending. You don't know how that trickles down to those families, especially in a small community. So a parent who may have a friendship with one of those other families may have a discussion and be able to slowly slip information that way. And so I think that's an important piece of this, is that a lot of times we think we know which families are in crisis and which families need help, and oftentimes it's the families that you never would have suspected had issues with addiction that make that phone call. So I think that's my learning curve too in all this.
Is there are there more addiction problems in a wealthier community versus a poorer community, or are there statistics on that at all?
It's interesting, because now, even though heroin has been an issue for so many years in inner cities and poorer communities, right now it has such a spotlight on it because it's impacting more wealthy suburban communities, which is an interesting. Being part of that process leaves me confused sometimes, because you want to be helpful, but at the same time realizing, wow, we really ignored this for so long in so many other communities. So I think I think it's, again, addiction is a disease that impacts and can impact all people. And I'm a licensed master's level social worker, so the idea there's such a strong connection between mental health and mental wellness and addiction is very I believe that very strongly. And so the more we can focus on the mental health of our young people and our community, I find that those are prevention tactics to look at to combating addiction as well.
Right. We actually have, maybe we'll take a little break right now because I think we have a video just to try to tell people about the problems that might come up with addiction in different ways. So maybe we'll take just a break and see if we can have that little video.
Great.
Don't Drink and Drive talk also include don't use marijuana and drive? You taught them excellent driving skills, but what about marijuana use and driving? Drinking and driving don't mix, but using marijuana and driving is also a combination for disaster. It impacts driver alertness, concentration, coordination, and reaction time. Marijuana is the most common illegal drug found in drivers killed in crashes. Westchester parents need to set clear non-drug use expectations. Get the facts at powertotheparent.org.
I know this had kind of spoken about a Westchester group, but I'm assuming that you work with groups in many of the different counties as you're reaching out to try to get help for young people.
Absolutely. Philipstown is in a unique location in the Hudson Valley in that we're in between 3 counties. So we're on the western side of Putnam County, and so the county services are a half an hour away from our residents. And to the south we have Peekskill, which is Westchester County. To the north we have Beacon, which is Dutchess County. Right. And what our community group has found is that a lot of times sending people off to these resources may not be the most effective, resources for them because it's either far. A lot of times they may not have transportation, and we're not on a public transportation line. There's a lot of barriers to getting the resources. So part of my job is to try to make that easier for people, and that includes reaching out to these agencies in Dutchess and in Peekskill, in Carmel, and saying specifically what services do you have that serve the residents of Philipstown, so that I don't have families calling and then being told we can't serve you, you're not in our catchment area. So I try to do that work for them, so that way I can give them their options.
Which is really important, because for people to start to have to do it themselves, and they're in a very difficult position, that has to be very, very helpful. So the video spoke about driving and the influence of alcohol and marijuana and everything else. It seems to me that I've seen statistics about youth, and I don't know whether maybe they're changing now. More youth are killed driving, but then we have the complication, not just driving, but the drugs and alcohol that are a part of all that. So is that part of the education that you're also, talking about with all? Yeah,
and our coalition's work and the town's work has been to educate on these areas of addiction. Even choosing my title was very thought out in terms of, I don't want to just call myself an opioid crisis person or a substance crisis person. All these different areas of addiction are important because they all link with each other, and there's no such thing as underage drinking being no big deal, or underage use of marijuana being no big deal when you're looking at the whole issue of addiction on a whole. And so that's the education we try to get out to families, that if we're really looking at this from a holistic approach, we have to be educating our young people on all of these substances and the impact that it has on their brain and on their body. It's been, studies have shown that the age of onset matters very, very much, meaning the first time a person uses a substance, if that is really impacts whether or not they're going to become addicted to that substance. So if they start using at age 13, they're much more likely to become addicted than if they have their first drink at age 18, for instance, and with other substances as well. And so because the young brain is at a point where it's growing and really developing at such a rapid rate that when substances are part of the picture,
Right.
it really throws that
Well,
off.
we've been having so many discussions in Albany about that, about the young brain and actually boys maturing even later than
Right.
girls. But I think that's why over time there's always been this issue of when do we allow people to drink. So the 21 that might not even be old enough.
Right, how interesting.
We've had that discussion with whether if we have recreational marijuana, what is the age and so on that one, which is being debated. And then we've got the e-cigarettes or cigarettes, and we're trying to raise that to 21 because there's also an implication for the young brain and so on. So yes, and we have so many discussions on all these age differentials and the fact that people can join the military and yet we don't allow them to smoke. So
that makes for some interesting conversations.
Right, except I have learned that the military, I think when you go to boot camp, you can't smoke anyway.
Interesting.
But anyway, but we have all these kinds of discussions. We actually had somebody come up to talk about a young person's brain when we were talking about raising the age for penalties for young people who've committed crimes, because their brains don't understand some of the times when they're creating their decision-making process is not so good. So
it's really fascinating. We know so much more now in looking at that, and you can really connect it to the social emotional aspects of knowing that having a feeling, but then really seeing it on brain imaging is really impactful.
Right. Now, with the people that you've seen, has there been a question about the use of marijuana with some of the people that you've
Yes,
been
definitely. And I think that the use of marijuana, the young people that I've seen before me, there's some who have been just as habitually addicted to marijuana as other substances in terms of self-medicating for anxiety, and instead of finding other coping mechanisms, they're turning to smoking marijuana instead of really looking at alternative ways to cope with what they're dealing with. And that's a really big deal, because at the period in their lives where adolescents need to develop these coping mechanisms, because life's not getting life
you
doesn't
have complications all the way through your life.
So you have to develop those, and at this stage when they instead turn to substances to cope with those, it's not sustainable in the long run. So when I have conversations with young people, I often ask them, what do you do when you're coping with problems? How do you try to deal with these are real issues that you're dealing with, and what are some other ways that we can look at trying to deal with these issues?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's probably almost better for somebody other than parents to talk with young people. Is that true?
I think it's good to have both. I think it's good to have parents who create the opportunity to have these discussions, and then it's also good for parents to know when they're not the best person to be having that discussion. I've worked with a parent who the son was very close with the grandmother and the aunt as well, and so instead of keeping the issues hidden from the rest of the family, when she found out that her son was experimenting, she said, you know what, the first thing I'm going to do is tell the rest of the family. And this is not in a shaming way, but in that we can all be part of this together. And so I thought that was such a brave and bold decision for her to make, and it really made a difference in this young person feeling that he had multiple sources of people to talk with.
Is there an age group that's most vulnerable, or is it just go through 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds up to
right? So
21,
and that
24?
there is like that middle school. I think even from when young people are even in elementary school, we should be talking about substance and substance abuse and addiction, and as they get older, the anatomy of the brain and how this works, because young people are smart. They want to know why, and so that's why the whole Just Say No campaign was not effective. It's understanding why can mommy and daddy have a glass of wine with dinner and I can't partake in that. And so these discussions happen in my own household, and the younger, sometimes it's difficult to get to start, but the more that you bring these conversations up, the more I think you'll find that young people really crave that kind of real talk. And it's better when coming from families now in today's day and age when so many young people are linked into the entire world.
Right, the social media.
Exactly. So better to have those conversations at home and then supported by professionals when needed.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Where do people get drugs in Philipstown? Are we dealing with people coming up from the city on the train, or is it a neighbor next door that gets it, or do you have any idea where it's all
that's
coming from?
That's a piece that the young people don't share with me because I think
okay.
so it's but you'll hear friends, that they mostly are obtaining substances from friends, so that's very vague. And but our police, our law enforcement, we have a combination of Cold Spring Village Police and Putnam County Sheriff's Department who have a great presence in our community and do a good job of being part of these coalition meetings. Oftentimes we have law enforcement at the table with us, and my position, I feel the development of my position has really, and having a point person, and that's what the community really tried to do, has brought all these, a lot of our community sectors to the table.
So how does Narcan fit into all this?
Yeah.
That's the way to kind of counter drug interaction and save lives.
Exactly. So Narcan, which is the overdose prevention drug, is given either nasally or with an injection by. It can be available to. I'm Narcan trained, and there's communities. Our community has done a lot of work to bring Narcan trainings to Philipstown. I know right now, Haldane has had staff go through Narcan training. Our law enforcement carries Narcan on them. The garrison schools just tried to are coordinating with us to bring Narcan trainings to their staff and to parents at school dismissal time. And we've done a lot. St. Christopher's offers Narcan trainings as well. St. Christopher's and Garrison.
So parents could go and get trained?
Yes.
If they felt that they needed to.
Right, exactly. So, and that's the work of our coalition, has really tried to bring more trainings to our community. And it's essential. It's an essential piece of this, because the longer we're keeping people alive, the more they live for another chance to get well. So. Right. So that's a big
We have all these drugs, just as we're concluding, but we have all these drugs that are in our medicine cabinets and things like that. Probably fewer because we're not allowing the pharmacies to give quite as many of the opioids. But what do you recommend for people to do?
So the town of Philipstown has a medication take-back box located right at Philipstown Town Hall. So that's open during town hall hours, and it's supervised. So when medication is dropped off, you can go there, drop it off, and then it's secured there at town of Philipstown. As well as our local pharmacy, Drug World, sells a number of different products, including the Deterra bag, which will you can put your medication in there and it destroys the medication. A couple of other innovative products like pill bottles that you can actually put the medication in, same kind of idea. And they've been a great partner with us, our local pharmacy. The county also runs medication take-back days, and so we post those on our Community Coalition website.
Right. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you, Sandy.
You are doing a wonderful job, and you have a lot of work ahead of you, I'm sure.
Yes.
But you're helping people have good lives and a good future ahead. So
thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations on your good work. If there are any questions, just give me a call at my office, 914-941-1111. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good evening. Thanks.